Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. The brakes failed. That's what the police report said. A mechanical failure that sent my wife's car careening off Sweetwater Bridge into the Etowah River below. They found Sarah's body 3 days later, tangled in river weeds 2 miles downstream. The airbags deployed properly. She didn't drown. The impact broke her neck instantly. That's what they told me. That's what I tell myself on good days. On bad days, I remember the voicemail. Sarah, frantic, driving too fast down County Road 9. There's something following me, Ethan. Something's wrong with it. It looks like Mr. Peterson from the hardware store, but it's not right. It's running on all fours behind the car. Oh God, it's keeping up with me at 60 miles an hour. The message cut off there. The police called it trauma-induced hallucination from the impact. Said maybe she hit a deer and the concussion made her imagine things before she went into the water. They didn't hear the voicemail. I never showed it to them. I deleted it the day after the funeral. Some things are better left unheard. That was 7 months ago in Blue Ridge, about an hour north of where I am now. I couldn't stay there, not with the memories and the sympathetic glances from neighbors, the constant reminders, the river I couldn't bring myself to look at. Money got tight after I quit my construction job. I sold our house for less than it was worth just to get away faster. Ended up in Dahlonega, Georgia, a small former gold rush town in the foothills of the Appalachians. It's quiet here. Anonymous. Just what I needed. I found a room for rent on the outskirts of town, a converted garage behind Mrs. Calloway's place on Auraria Road. It's not much, but the rent's cheap, and she doesn't ask questions when I come home at dawn, reeking of whiskey from my late-night drives through the mountains. The job listing caught my eye at Woody's Diner while I was nursing a coffee and picking at a plate of eggs. Night security needed, Hargrove Estate, good pay, minimal experience required. It listed a phone number with a local area code. I called on impulse, desperate to stop draining my dwindling savings. The man who answered identified himself as Lawrence Hargrove. His voice had the refined southern drawl of old money. He asked few questions about my qualifications, seemed satisfied that I had worked in construction and had a clean record. Then he said something odd. There are rules to working at Hargrove Hill, Mr. Wells. Non-negotiable rules. Can you follow precise instructions without question? I said yes, of course. I've always been good at following directions. Excellent. The estate needs someone with discipline, someone who can keep to themselves. The job pays $4,000 a month, cash. That's more than double what I'd make anywhere else around here. I didn't ask why. Sometimes a gift horse comes along when you're drowning, and you don't inspect its teeth. You grab its mane and hold on. I start tonight. Mr. Hargrove told me to arrive at sunset, to memorize the rules he'll provide, and under no circumstances to leave my post until dawn. What could go wrong? After Sarah, I've got nothing left to lose anyway. The GPS led me down winding back roads until pavement gave way to gravel. Massive oak trees line the narrow drive, their branches forming a canopy that blocked what little remained of the evening light. After about a mile, Hargrove Hill Mansion emerged from behind a curtain of Spanish moss. The house was pure antebellum grandeur gone to seed. 3 stories of weathered white columns and wraparound porches. I counted 12 windows across the front, each with black shutters that stood out like empty eye sockets against the faded paint. The surrounding grounds stretched for acres, overgrown but still hinting at their former splendor. A stone fountain stood dry in the circular drive, its basin filled with dead leaves. I parked my battered Ford pickup beside the only other vehicle, a pristine black Cadillac that had to be at least 30 years old, but looked showroom new. As I cut the engine, the silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the cooling tick of my engine and my own breathing. Lawrence Hargrove met me at the door before I could knock. He was tall and rail-thin, maybe 70, with a full head of silver hair and a kind of deep tan that comes from years of outdoor living. "Mr. Wells, precisely on time. I appreciate punctuality." He didn't offer his hand, just gestured for me to enter. The foyer was dimly lit by a crystal chandelier that might have been worth more than everything I'd ever owned. The air smelled of lemon oil and something else, something earthy and medicinal that I couldn't place. "This way," Hargrove said, leading me through a formal dining room where the table was set for a dinner party that clearly hadn't happened in decades. Dust cloths covered what I assumed were priceless antiques. We ended up in a wood-paneled study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A massive desk dominated the room, and behind it, a portrait of a stern-faced woman in a high-necked Victorian dress stared down at us with painted eyes that seemed to follow my movements. "My grandmother," Hargrove said, noticing my gaze. "Elizabeth Hargrove. She built this house in 1887 after her husband died in unusual circumstances." He motioned for me to sit in a leather chair across from the desk, then poured 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Bourbon, family recipe. We used to distill it on the property before Prohibition." He handed me the glass. "You look like you could use it." The bourbon burned going down, but it was smooth. Probably the best I'd ever tasted. "Mr. Wells, let me be direct. This job is simple but potentially dangerous. You will patrol the grounds and the first floor of the main house from sunset to sunrise. The upper floors are off limits. Always." He paused, studying my face. "Do you believe in the supernatural, Mr. Wells?" Sarah's voicemail flashed through my mind. The thing that wasn't Mr. Peterson running on all fours. "I believe there are things I can't explain," I answered carefully. Hargrove nodded as if I'd confirmed something. "Hargrove Hill has residents that predate my family's ownership of this land. We've maintained an arrangement with them for generations. Part of that arrangement involves certain boundaries and rituals." He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "Inside are 7 rules. Memorize them. Your life depends on their strict observance. After you've committed them to memory, burn the paper in that fireplace." He pointed to the hearth where a small fire crackled despite the warm September evening. I opened the envelope and unfolded a single sheet of creamy stationery. The handwriting was elegant, almost calligraphic. "Rules for night watchmen, Hargrove Estate. Remain on the first floor or grounds at all times. Never attempt to access the upper floors. If you hear piano music coming from the east wing, lock yourself in the security office until it stops. Do not attempt to investigate the source. The large oak tree on the north lawn must have exactly 1 lantern hanging from its lowest branch from sunset to sunrise. If the light goes out, relight it immediately. If you encounter anyone on the property who is not Lawrence Hargrove, do not speak to them directly. Bow your head and say only, 'The Hargrove family respects the covenant.' Should you see a woman in white on the 2nd floor balcony, avert your eyes immediately and return to the security office. Lock the door and do not emerge until dawn, regardless of what you hear. The hunting dogs in the kennels behind the house must not be fed or released under any circumstances, even if they appear starving or injured. At 3:17 a.m. precisely, place the bronze key provided in the lock of the cellar door. Turn it 3 times clockwise without opening the door, then remove it. Failure to do this even once will void our arrangement. I read through the list twice, my mouth going dry despite the bourbon. Each rule seemed more bizarre than the last, but I'd heard stranger things from foremen on construction sites over the years about how to prevent accidents. Superstition is just routine with a story attached. Questions? Hargrove asked as I folded the paper and approached the fireplace. What exactly am I guarding the property against? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Conventional threats. Trespassers, vandals. The usual concerns for a historic property with valuable antiques. He paused. Though I suspect you're more concerned about the unconventional threats. I dropped the paper into the flames, watching as the edges curled and blackened. Let's just say that Hargrove Hill exists at a crossroads, Mr. Wells. Not just geographically, but metaphysically. The rules maintain balance. Maintain them, and you maintain your safety. He stood, indicating our meeting was over, and handed me a heavy ring of antique keys, a flashlight, and an old-fashioned brass lantern. The security office is down the hall, last door on the right. You'll find everything else you need there, including the bronze key mentioned in Rule 7. I'll return at dawn to relieve you. He checked his watch. Sunset is in 12 minutes. I suggest you light that lantern immediately and hang it on the oak tree. As I turned to leave, he added, One more thing, Mr. Wells. What made you leave Blue Ridge? I froze, certain I hadn't mentioned where I'd moved from. A personal matter, I said. Indeed. Hargrove's gaze was knowing. Sometimes what follows us is worse than what we might face ahead. Hargrove's Cadillac crunched down the gravel drive as I hurried across the expansive lawn toward the oak tree he'd mentioned. The massive tree stood alone in a clearing, its gnarled branches stretching upward like arthritic fingers against the darkening sky. One branch hung lower than the rest, as if bowing to place something on the ground. I lit the lantern with trembling hands. The flame caught, casting a warm yellow glow that seemed pitifully small against the growing darkness. When I hung it from the branch, the metal hook there was worn smooth, suggesting decades, maybe centuries of the same ritual. As the sun dipped below the tree line, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. My breath fogged in front of me, unusual for September in Georgia. A faint mist began rising from the ground, swirling around my ankles as I made my way back to the house. The security office was a converted parlor with original wainscoting and crown molding that clashed with the modern additions. A desk with 3 CCTV monitors, a microwave, mini fridge, and a military-style cot in the corner. The bronze key mentioned in Rule 7 sat on the desk atop a hand-drawn map of the estate. Next to it was a revolver, a Colt Python, blued steel with wooden grips. 6 rounds were arranged beside it like a morbid game of solitaire. I checked the CCTV feeds. One showed the front entrance, another the back garden, and the third was trained on that oak tree with its solitary lantern. The 4th monitor was dark, labeled East Wing, with a handwritten note taped below. If this activates, follow rule number 2. My phone showed no signal, not unusual for rural Georgia. There was a landline on the desk, but when I lifted the receiver, the line was dead. Of course. I settled in, watching the monitors while mentally reviewing the rules. Piano music, hide, oak tree lantern, keep lit. Strangers, recite the covenant line. Woman in white, avert eyes, lock down. Dogs, ignore them. Cellar door, key ritual at 3:17 a.m. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I patrolled the first floor every half hour, flashlight beams slicing through the shadows. The place was a museum of faded Southern glory. Tiffany lamps, hand-carved furniture, Civil War-era portraits of stern-faced Hargroves. In one room, oddly, every mirror was covered with black cloth. Around midnight, I made a pot of coffee in the security office. As I took my first sip, a flicker of movement on the oak tree monitor caught my attention. Something was moving near the base of the tree. A deer, maybe, or a large dog. I squinted at the grainy black and white image. It wasn't either of those things. A figure crouched on all fours below the tree, neck craned upward toward the lantern. Its proportions were all wrong. Limbs too long, joints articulated in impossible ways. Though the footage was monochrome, I could tell it was pale, almost white. As I watched, it began to climb the trunk with jerking, spider-like movements. My heart hammered in my chest. I grabbed the revolver, loaded it with clumsy fingers, and headed for the door. Rule 3 was clear. If the light goes out, relight it immediately. The night air hit me like a wall of ice water. The mist had thickened to fog that swirled chest-high across the lawn. I could see the lantern's glow through the murk, still burning, still safe. I kept the revolver raised as I approached, scanning the darkness. Nothing moved in the fog. When I reached the oak, I shone my flashlight up into the branches. Empty. The bark showed no signs of claw marks or disturbance. Maybe I'd imagined it. Sleep deprivation and bourbon, plus all Hargrove's talk of arrangements with supernatural residents. My mind was playing tricks. Then I noticed the ground around the tree. The dew-damp grass was flattened in a circular pattern, like something had been pacing around the trunk. A lot of somethings. The pattern spiraled inward toward the tree, as if whatever made it had been drawn to the center over time. A twig snapped behind me. I whirled, gun raised, but nothing was there. Just swirling fog and shadowed lawn. Another sound, this time from my right, a soft scratching like nails on wood. I turned again. Nothing. They were toying with me. I backed toward the house, keeping the revolver ready and my eyes moving. The sounds continued, always just at the edge of perception, always from a different direction. The fog seemed to thicken with each step, and by the time I reached the porch, I could barely see the lantern's glow through the murky darkness. Inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The grandfather clock in the hall showed 12:47 a.m. Over 7 hours to go. Back in the security office, the CCTV monitors showed nothing unusual. The lantern still burned beneath the oak tree. Whatever I'd seen climbing the trunk was gone. I decided to make another round of the first floor to calm my nerves. The main hall was quiet, except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock. I passed the dining room, the study where I'd met Hargrove, a conservatory filled with dead plants and expensive pottery. When I reached the east wing, I paused. A chill draft flowed from the darkened corridor ahead. Rule 2 echoed in my mind. If you hear piano music coming from the east wing, lock yourself in the security office until it stops. I wasn't hearing piano music, but something about the darkness beyond felt expectant, waiting. I decided to skip that section of my patrol and turned back. The first note was so soft I almost missed it, a single high C that hung in the air like frost. Then another note, lower, followed by a rippling minor chord. A nocturne played with delicate precision. My blood turned to slush in my veins. I ran, no longer caring about appearing brave or professional. The music swelled behind me, following like a physical presence as I sprinted down the hall toward the security office. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and sank to the floor. The piano continued, now playing something that might have been Chopin, if Chopin had composed in keys designed to make human teeth ache and human skin try to crawl away from the bones it covered. On the CCTV monitor, the East Wing feed had activated. It showed a grand piano in what looked like a music room. The piano bench was empty. The keys depressed themselves in perfect time with the music I was hearing through the door. I watched, transfixed with horror, as an indentation appeared on the bench, as if something invisible had sat down. The lid of the piano slowly closed, but the music continued uninterrupted. Then a figure walked into the frame. It was a woman in a long white dress, her back to the camera. Her hair was piled high in an old-fashioned style, and she stood with unnatural stillness beside the ghost pianist. Slowly, she began to turn toward the camera. I slammed my hand on the monitor power button before I could see her face. Rule 5 burned in my mind. Should you see a woman in white on the second-floor balcony, avert your eyes immediately. But this wasn't the balcony. This was the East Wing, first floor. Did the rule still apply? I couldn't risk finding out, not after what happened to Sarah. The piano music stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so complete my ears rang with it. I waited, counting seconds, then minutes. After 15 minutes of silence, I dared to check the monitors again. The East Wing feed was dark once more. The oak tree lantern still burned. Everything looked normal, except the lantern was swinging. There was no wind tonight. The fog hung motionless outside, but the lantern swayed back and forth as if something had just brushed against it. I checked my watch. 1:36 a.m. Less than 2 hours until I needed to perform the key ritual at the cellar door. Until then, I would stay locked in this room, revolver in hand, watching that lantern and praying it didn't go out. Something scratched softly at the security office door, like a cat asking to be let in. Then came a whisper, so quiet I might have imagined it. "Ethan, I'm cold. The river is so cold." It was Sarah's voice. "Ethan, please. I need to come in. I'm so cold." Sarah's voice, exactly as I remembered it. That slight Tennessee lilt she never lost despite years in Atlanta before we moved to Blue Ridge. The way she'd draw out the AI in my name just a fraction longer than necessary. My hand moved to the doorknob reflexively, fingers brushing metal before Rule 4 flashed in my mind. If you encounter anyone on the property who is not Lawrence Hargrove, do not speak to them directly. Bow your head and say only, "The Hargrove family respects the covenant." "Sarah died 7 months ago," I said to the door, my voice breaking. "Whatever you are, you're not her." Something slammed against the door with enough force to make the hinges creak. The wood bulged inward slightly, as if struck by a battering ram. "You promised to protect me!" The voice was still Sarah's, but distorted, vibrating with rage. "You failed!" I stumbled backward, raising the revolver. "The Hargrove family respects the covenant," I said, head bowed. A noise like fingernails dragged down a chalkboard emanated from the other side of the door. Then silence. I stood frozen, revolver aimed at the door, for what felt like hours. My watch showed only 3 minutes had passed. 1:39 a.m. The CCTV monitors still showed nothing unusual. The lantern swayed gently beneath the oak tree, but no figure lurked nearby. The East Wing feed remained dark. From all appearances, I was alone in a historic mansion on a foggy night. Nothing more. I knew better. It occurred to me that I should document what was happening. If I didn't survive the night, someone should know what happened here. I found a leather-bound journal in the desk drawer with blank pages. Perfect. I began to write, recording everything from my arrival at Hargrove Hill to the voice at the door. The act of documenting calmed me, provided focus. By the time I finished, it was 2:43 a.m., just over half an hour until the key ritual. Movement on one of the monitors caught my eye. The lantern under the oak tree was swinging violently now, its light flickering as if about to go out. I needed to check it. Rule 3 was clear about relighting it immediately, but the thought of going outside again made my skin crawl. I gathered my courage, checked the revolver, and stepped into the hallway. The air felt different, heavier, charged with static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand on end. The smell hit me immediately. Petrichor, the scent of rain on dry earth, though I was indoors, and there had been no rain. As I moved through the main hall, I noticed the covered mirrors. One had been uncovered, the black cloth now pooled on the floor beneath it. In the dim light, my reflection was barely visible, just a shadowy outline. Then it moved differently than I did. I froze, staring at the mirror. My reflection stood still for a moment, then tilted its head at an angle no human neck should be capable of. Its mouth stretched into a smile too wide for its face, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. I ran. Outside, the fog had thickened to the consistency of cotton batting. The lantern's glow was just visible, a diffuse yellow orb floating in a sea of gray. I sprinted across the lawn, my boots squishing in the damp grass. When I reached the oak tree, the lantern was barely burning, its flame guttering in non-existent wind. I reached up to steady it, noticing that the metal had grown ice cold despite the flame within. As my fingers touched the lantern, the light died completely. Darkness swallowed me. The fog seemed to press closer, curling around my body like curious fingers. I fumbled with my lighter, hands shaking so badly I dropped it in the grass. Cursing, I knelt to search for it, my fingers combing through wet grass. A twig snapped nearby. Close, too close. I froze, then slowly turned my head. Red eyes gleamed in the darkness, about 4 feet off the ground. They were animal eyes, reflecting what little ambient light remained, but they were oddly spaced, too far apart for a deer or coyote. As I watched, they blinked vertically, like a reptile. The Hargrove family respects the covenant, I whispered, bowing my head. A soft, chittering sound answered me, like insects or small mammals communicating in high frequencies at the edge of human hearing. The red eyes remained fixed on me, unblinking now. My fingers closed around the lighter. With fumbling urgency, I relit the lantern, nearly burning myself in the process. Light bloomed, pushing back the darkness in a small circle around the oak. The eyes were gone, but the fog 20 yards to my right churned and bulged, as if something large was moving through it. I hung the lantern securely on its branch and backed away, keeping my eyes on that roiling fog. As I retreated toward the house, I glanced at my watch. 3:12 a.m. 5 minutes until the key ritual. I sprinted the rest of the way, bursting through the front door and slamming it behind me. Down the hallway, past the dining room and study, toward the rough stone archway that led to the cellar stairs. The bronze key was still in my pocket, heavy and unnaturally warm against my thigh. The cellar door was ancient oak bound with black iron. No light came from beneath it, just a steady, cold draft that smelled of earth and something metallic, like old pennies or blood. The keyhole was ornate, shaped like a screaming mouth. 3:16 a.m. I inserted the key, waiting for the second hand on my watch to hit the 12. As I stood there, key poised, a sound drifted up from beyond the door. A low, rhythmic chanting in a language I'd never heard. Guttural consonants and flowing vowels that seemed to bypass my ears and vibrate directly in my skull. Multiple voices, layered and harmonizing in ways that human vocal cords shouldn't be capable of. 3:17 a.m. I turned the key 3 times clockwise, my skin crawling as each rotation produced a sound like grinding bones. The chanting stopped abruptly. Something heavy shifted against the door from the other side, as if leaning against it. I could hear breathing, wet, labored breathing that fogged the keyhole. "We smell her on you," a voice whispered through the keyhole. "The river woman. She's ours now, but you could join her." I yanked the key out and stumbled backward. The breathing continued, and now I could see the fog, the same fog from outside, seeping through the keyhole and the cracks around the doorframe. It curled and twisted in the air like it was alive, forming half-seen shapes that dissolved before I could fully comprehend them. I ran back to the security office, slamming and locking the door behind me. The CCTV monitors flickered with static, but between the visual snow, I could make out the lantern still burning beneath the oak tree. Good. One less rule broken. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tried to process what was happening. This wasn't simple haunting or local superstition. Something ancient lived at Hargrove Hill, something that knew about Sarah, something that claimed her. I pulled out the journal again, documenting the latest events with shaking hands. As I wrote about the voice at the cellar door, a new thought struck me with paralyzing force. What if they were telling the truth? What if whatever claimed to have Sarah was real? What if I could see her again? No. That was exactly how these things lured you in. I'd watched enough horror movies to recognize the trap, yet the thought lingered, seductive in its simplicity. What did I have to lose? Sarah was everything. Without her. A sharp rapping on the window jerked me from my thoughts. 3 quick knocks, pause, 3 more. The security office was on the first floor, windows facing the back garden. I approached cautiously, revolver raised, and pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. A man stood in the garden, illuminated by the security lights. He wore old-fashioned clothes, a threadbare suit that might have been fashionable in the 1930s, and he was looking directly at my window. His face was ordinary enough, middle-aged, weathered by sun and wind. But his eyes reflected the light like an animal's, gleaming yellow in the darkness. He smiled when he saw me, a too wide smile that reminded me of my twisted reflection earlier. Then he dropped to all fours with a sickening sound of popping joints and scuttled sideways into the shadows like a crab. I let the curtain fall back, bile rising in my throat. That unnatural sideways movement, the glowing eyes, the wrongness of it all. It matched Sarah's description of what had been chasing her car that night. The thing that wasn't Mr. Peterson. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Impossible given the lack of signal. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. The screen showed a text message from Sarah's number, which I hadn't deleted even after all these months. The message contained 3 words, "Behind you now." Every muscle in my body locked up. I couldn't breathe, couldn't turn around. The air behind me felt suddenly colder, disturbed by movement. Something brushed against the back of my neck, light as a feather, cold as grave dirt. "The Hargrove family respects the covenant," I choked out, squeezing my eyes shut. A soft laugh answered me, so close to my ear that I felt warm breath. Then the presence was gone, leaving behind the scent of river water and decay. I forced myself to turn around. The office was empty. My phone buzzed again. New message. "Not the rules they told you." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. What did that mean? Were Hargrove's rules wrong or incomplete? A third message appeared. "Find the true rules. Find me." The CCTV monitors suddenly went black, then flickered back to life, showing the same feeds as before. Except now, in each one, a dark figure stood in the center of the frame, facing the camera. Different locations, identical poses, still and patient. waiting. My watch read 3:47 a.m., over 3 hours until dawn, 3 hours until Hargrove returned, 3 hours to survive whatever game was being played at Hargrove Hill, unless Sarah was really trying to contact me, unless there was a way to save her from whatever had her in its grip. I glanced at the revolver on the desk. 6 bullets, 6 figures on the monitors. Maybe it was time to make my own rules. I had to know the truth. If Sarah was trying to contact me, if there was even the slightest chance she wasn't completely gone, I needed to understand what was happening at Hargrove Hill. The text had mentioned true rules. Maybe there was documentation somewhere in the house, something Hargrove hadn't shown me. I checked my watch. 3:52 a.m., still time before dawn to search. I hesitated at the security office door, revolver in hand. The figures on the monitors hadn't moved, still standing in their unnatural stillness, facing the cameras. Would they be there in reality, or were the feeds being manipulated? Only one way to find out. I unlocked the door and peered into the hallway. Empty. The distant tick of the grandfather clock was the only sound. I stepped out cautiously, keeping my back to the wall. The study where I'd met Hargrove seemed the most logical place to start. As I moved through the mansion, I noticed small details I'd missed before. Symbols carved into the crown molding. Spirals and angular rooms that hurt my eyes if I looked at them too long. Faint, brownish stains on the hardwood floor in irregular patterns, like something had been dragged through old blood. Marks around the door frames as if someone had clawed desperately to get out. Or in. The study door was unlocked. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the room. The portrait of Elizabeth Hargrove watched me with painted eyes that seemed to follow my movements. I began searching the desk, rifling through drawers filled with correspondence and ledgers dating back decades. Nothing about rules or covenants. The bookshelf yielded similarly mundane results. First edition novels, historical texts, family photo albums. Behind the desk was a glass display case I hadn't noticed earlier. Inside rested a leather-bound journal similar to the one I'd been writing in, but much older, the spine cracked with age. Beside it lay a silver letter opener shaped like a dagger, perfect for breaking into a locked case. The glass shattered loudly in the quiet room. I flinched, expecting something to come running, but the house remained silent. I grabbed the journal and opened it to a random page. The handwriting was cramped and urgent. The ink faded to brown. I squinted to make it out in the dim light. April 17th, 1891. The bargain holds, but at what cost? 3 more children from the tenant farms gone this month. The authorities suspect wolves, but we know better. Elizabeth insists the sacrifices are necessary to maintain the boundary. But I fear her mind has been corrupted by prolonged contact with the outsiders. She speaks of them now with reverence rather than fear. The new rules she's implementing for the staff are strange. Rituals at specific times, lanterns that must remain lit, mirrors to be covered at night. She claims they will keep us safe, but I believe they are actually strengthening their hold on the property. E spends hours in the East Wing now, playing that damnable piano for audiences none of us can see. I flipped to a later entry. December 3rd, 1892. E is gone. We found her clothes by the oak tree, perfectly arranged as if she had simply stepped out of them and walked away. The staff whisper that she has joined the covenant. I know better. The boundary has been breached, and they have taken her. I discovered her private journal today, hidden in a compartment beneath the library floorboards. The true rules are there, the actual terms of the covenant she made with the skinwalkers. Not the protective rituals she claimed, but instructions for feeding them, for making them stronger. May God forgive her. May God forgive us all. Skinwalkers. The word sent a chill down my spine, confirming my worst suspicions about what had been hunting Sarah that night. I needed to find that hidden journal with the true rules. A floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled, raising the revolver. Nothing was there, but the portrait of Elizabeth Hargrove had changed. Her eyes were now coal black, and her lips curled in a knowing smile that hadn't been there before. My phone buzzed. Library, northeast corner, loose floorboard under the Atlas stand. I pocketed the phone and hurried down the hall toward the library, keeping the revolver ready. The house felt different now, alive and aware, like I was moving through the belly of a massive organism that was watching my every step. The library was a large room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a massive globe in the center. Reading tables were arranged around the periphery, one of which held a large book of maps, open to a page showing Georgia as it had appeared in the 1800s. In the northeast corner stood an atlas stand, a wooden pedestal designed to hold oversized books. I moved it aside, revealing worn floorboards beneath. One board was slightly discolored compared to its neighbors. I worked my fingers into the seam and pried upward. The board came loose with a groan of old nails, revealing a small space beneath. Inside was a slim volume bound in what appeared to be pale leather, but felt wrong under my fingers. Too soft, too supple for animal hide. The first page bore a title in flowing script, The Covenant of Hargrove Hill, True Terms and Observances. Below it, a dedication, for those who would walk between worlds. I turned to the next page and found what I was looking for. The true rules. The covenant requires blood tithe by the 7th day of each month. Hargrove blood is preferred, but substitute offerings are acceptable if properly prepared. The boundary stones must never be moved. They do not mark the property line, but the edges of their domain. The piano must be played at midnight to maintain the illusion that separates their world from ours. It need not be played by human hands. Those taken by the walkers may be reclaimed before the 3rd full moon following their capture. After this time, they belong fully to the outer court. The oak serves as the gateway. What hangs from its branch is not a lantern, but a beacon, calling them to the feeding grounds. Mirrors serve as eyes for those who dwell below. Cover them when they are not needed for communication. The cellar door must be unlocked during the dark of the moon to allow passage. The key turn is merely ceremonial, a reminder of our obligation. My hands shook as I processed what I was reading. This wasn't a set of protective rituals, it was a feeding schedule. The Hargroves hadn't been keeping evil at bay. They'd been cultivating it, directing it, feeding it. And Sarah, if Rule 4 was true and she had been taken 7 months ago, it was too late to reclaim her. She belonged to them now, unless the voice at the cellar door had been telling the truth. I could join her. A noise from the doorway made me look up. Lawrence Hargrove stood there, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. In his hand was a shotgun, aimed directly at me. "I see you've been exploring, Mr. Wells. That's unfortunate." His voice was calm, almost resigned. "We had high hopes for you." "What did you do to my wife?" I demanded, raising the revolver. Hargrove's eyebrows lifted. "Your wife?" "I've never met your wife, but they have her. The skinwalkers, the things you've been feeding." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ah, I see. No, Mr. Wells, whatever happened to your wife was separate, though perhaps not unrelated. There are many hunting grounds along the Appalachian Range, many families like mine maintaining many covenants. He took a step into the library. "The lantern you've been maintaining doesn't keep them away. It guides them home. Tonight is the dark of the moon, their hunting night. And you, Mr. Wells, were supposed to be the offering." My finger tightened on the revolver's trigger. "The true rules mention a blood tithe." Hargrove nodded. "Indeed. Why do you think I was so unconcerned about your qualifications? Why the job pays cash. No paperwork, no questions when you disappear." His expression softened with what looked almost like pity. Night guards seldom last more than one shift here. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it doesn't matter now. You've read the book. You've been marked." He glanced at my hands, and I noticed with horror that my fingertips were stained black, where they had touched the pale leather cover. The stain was spreading, dark lines crawling up my veins like ink in water. "What's happening to me?" I gasped. "They're coming for you. Listen." From outside came the sound of howling. Not wolves, but something that had learned to mimic wolves poorly. The baying rose and fell in unnatural cadence, dozens of voices calling in near-perfect unison. Beneath it, I could hear the pounding of feet, many feet, racing toward the house. "The hunting dogs," I whispered, remembering Rule 6. Hargrove smiled thinly. "You really should have read the fine print, Mr. Wells. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to remove myself before they arrive. They get overexcited during the feeding." He backed toward the door. "Consider this a professional courtesy. Save one bullet for yourself. It's better than the alternative." The howling grew louder. I had very little time left. The howling grew closer, accompanied by the thunder of countless feet racing toward the mansion. I had to move. The library had too many entrances, too many windows. I needed somewhere defensible. I jammed the journal into my jacket pocket and ran into the hallway, nearly colliding with a grandfather clock. 4:23 a.m., less than 2 hours until dawn. Could I survive that long? My first instinct was to return to the security office, but Hargrove would expect that. Instead, I sprinted toward the east wing, the piano room. The CCTV monitor had shown only one entrance. One way in meant one way to defend. The howling abruptly stopped, plunging the house into unnatural silence. Worse than the noise. They were close now, coordinating their approach. The black stain had spread past my wrists, dark tendrils crawling beneath my skin like ink in water. It didn't hurt, but my hands felt cold, increasingly numb. I clutched the revolver tighter, afraid I might lose my grip. The east wing corridor was darker than the rest of the house, the ornate wallpaper peeling in long strips like flayed skin. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of Hargroves with increasingly unsettling features, eyes too wide, smiles too rigid, fingers too long and spindly. The final portrait showed a young Lawrence beside an elderly woman with coal-black eyes. Elizabeth Hargrove, still alive within the last 50 years. Impossible. The piano room stood at the end of the corridor, its double doors open. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the grand piano at the center. The bench was empty. No ghostly pianist, no woman in white. Just a waiting instrument, its polished surface reflecting the moon like a dark mirror. I entered cautiously, scanning for threats. The room was larger than it had appeared on the CCTV, with high ceilings and mirrored walls that created an illusion of infinite space. Every surface was covered in the same carved symbols I'd noticed throughout the house, but here they formed continuous patterns, spiraling toward the center of the room, toward the piano. The first window shattered as I was securing the doors. Glass exploded inward, showering the hardwood floor with glittering shards. I whirled, revolver raised. and fired at the pale, elongated figure crawling through the opening. The shot hit center mass. The creature jerked backward with a high-pitched wail, but didn't fall. Instead, it clung to the window frame, twitching. In the moonlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. It might have been human once. The basic structure was there. Head, torso, limbs. But everything was wrong. The proportions were distorted, limbs too long and jointed in extra places. Its skin was milky white and hairless, stretched tight over a protruding skeletal structure. The face had recognizable features, but arranged incorrectly, as if someone had described a human face to an alien sculptor who'd never seen one. But the eyes, God, the eyes were human, terrified, pleading, aware, trapped in a body that had been remade by something that didn't understand or care about human anatomy. It opened its mouth, too wide, jaw unhinging like a snake, and spoke in a voice that was a broken parody of human speech. Help me. I froze, the revolver wavering. That voice, distorted and wrong, but unmistakable. Tom, I whispered. Tom Peterson, hardware store owner from Blue Ridge. The man Sarah had seen chasing her car, running on all fours at impossible speed. Before I could process this, more windows shattered. Pale limbs reached through, clawing at the frames. Dozens of them. The hunting pack had arrived. I backed toward the piano. 5 bullets left, and nowhere to run. The creatures slithered through the broken windows, crawling along the walls and ceiling like insects, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, as if they were still learning to use their twisted bodies. My back hit the piano, keys jangling discordantly. An idea formed. Rule 3 from the True Covenant. The piano must be played at midnight to maintain the illusion that separates their world from ours. It was well past midnight. But maybe. I sat at the bench and began to play. I'm no musician, just a few years of reluctant childhood lessons. But I remembered enough Chopin to stumble through a nocturne, the same one I'd heard earlier. The effect was immediate. The creatures froze, heads tilting in unison like curious dogs. Their movements slowed, became more deliberate, more human. They formed a semicircle around the piano, watching me with those trapped human eyes. I kept playing, missing notes, repeating passages when my fingers slipped, but maintaining the melody. The black stain had reached my elbows now, making my arms heavy and cold. Each keystroke required increasing concentration. One of the creatures stepped forward, the one I'd shot, the one that had spoken with Tom Peterson's voice. It no longer moved like an insect, but stood almost normally, its twisted frame approximating human posture. "You play," it said, the words clearer now. "Like her." "Like who?" I asked, fingers still moving across the keys. "Mistress, Elizabeth." It gestured to the mirrors lining the walls. "She taught us the rules." I glanced at the mirrors and nearly stumbled over the keys. Instead of reflecting the room, they showed different scenes. Forests, caves, what looked like the underside of a lake, and standing in each scene was a woman in a white dress, her back to the viewer. Elizabeth Hargrove, not dead, but somewhere else. "What are you?" I asked, returning my attention to the keys. As long as I played, they remained docile. "What happened to Tom Peterson? To my wife, Sarah?" The creature that had been Tom Peterson tilted its head. "We walk between, take skins, learn shapes." It gestured to its distorted body. This one fought, broke the pattern. It pointed to another creature, smaller, standing near the back of the group. That one came willing. River woman. My fingers faltered on the keys. "Sarah." The smaller creature stepped forward. Its proportions were less distorted than the others, its movements more fluid. As it approached, I could see familiar features in the alien face, the curve of Sarah's cheek, the shape of her eyes. But wrong, stretched, reimagined by something that didn't understand what it was copying. "Ethan," it said, and the voice was almost right, almost Sarah. "You came." "What happened to you?" I whispered, still playing mechanically, tears blurring my vision. I saw them, in Blue Ridge. Followed one. Curious. The thing that had been Sarah gestures to Tom Creature. It chased. I ran. Car went into river. A terrible broken approximation of a smile stretched across its face. They found me. Made me. New. "The Covenant," I said, understanding dawning. "Hargrove said there are many hunting grounds, many families maintaining covenants. The skinwalkers are everywhere along the Appalachian Range." Sarah Creature nodded. "Many doors, many bargains." It reached toward me with elongated fingers. "Join us, Ethan. Become new." The piano music swelled unbidden, keys moving under my fingers with a will of their own. The black stain had reached my shoulders now, crawling up my neck in icy tendrils. My skin felt tight, wrong, like it belonged to someone else. "The true rules," I gasped, fighting to maintain control of my hands. "Rule 4 says those taken can be reclaimed before the third full moon." "Sarah, it's been 7 months." Sarah Creature's expression shifted, something like sadness crossing its distorted features. "Too late for old shape. But can be together. New shapes." The other creatures had begun swaying in rhythm with the music. A grotesque dance of misshapen limbs and twisted torsos. More were crawling through the windows now, filling the room. Their movements became more synchronized, more ritual-like. They were preparing for something. My phone buzzed in my pocket. With one hand still playing, I checked the screen. Not too late. Boundary stone. Break covenant. I looked up at the Sarah Creature. The boundary stones. Rule 2 says they mark their domain. If I break them, would it free you? All of you? The creatures hissed in unison, their swaying becoming agitated. Tom Creature leaned forward, its face inches from mine. "Break stones. Break us. No more shapes. No more walking between." "It would kill you?" "Release," the Sarah Creature corrected. "No more prison. No more hunger." It gestured to the black stain climbing my neck. "Too late for you soon. Changing begins." I felt it then, a prickling sensation as my skin began to stretch, bones shifting beneath. The first stage of transformation. Soon I'd be like them, trapped in a twisted parody of human form, hungry for whatever these things hungered for. "Where?" I gasped, the pain intensifying. "Where are the boundary stones?" Sarah Creature pointed to one of the mirrors, which now showed the oak tree. At its base, half buried in moss and earth, was a small stone obelisk carved with the same symbols that adorned the house. 7 stones, 7 points. Must break. All. The creature's voice was urgent now. "Dawn comes. Walkers return below. Take you with us." I checked my watch. 5:13 a.m. Less than an hour until sunrise. The stain had covered most of my body now, my skin turning translucent, veins darkening as whatever transformation the book had triggered progressed. "How do I break them?" I asked, voice distorting as my vocal cords began to reshape. Tom Creature reached into its twisted form and produced a familiar object, the bronze key I'd used in the cellar door ritual. "Hargrove key, opens, closes, breaks." I took the key with a hand that barely felt like my own anymore. My fingers had elongated, joints cracking as new articulation points formed. I was becoming one of them, and quickly. "Why help me?" I asked, forcing the increasingly alien vocal apparatus to form words. Tired, Sarah Creature said simply. Centuries walking. Want rest. I stood from the piano bench, my new body moving with jerky, uncoordinated motions. The music stopped, but the creatures remained docile, watching me with those horrible human eyes. I'll try, I promised. For all of you. For Sarah. The creatures parted, forming a path to the door. Outside, gray pre-dawn light was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky. I had minutes, not hours. The Sarah Creature approached, movements fluid despite its distorted frame. With elongated fingers, it touched my face in a gesture achingly familiar. How Sarah used to touch me when saying goodbye. Run, Ethan, it whispered. Run fast. We hold others back. Not for long. Behind us, howling erupted from deeper in the house. The hunting pack Hargrove had mentioned. The ones not gathered here. The ones still fully under the Covenant's control. I ran, my new body moving with inhuman speed despite its awkwardness. Through the mansion, out the front door, across the lawn toward the oak tree. Behind me, sounds of combat erupted. The creatures from the piano room fighting their kin, buying me time. The eastern sky blushed pink with approaching dawn. Whether I succeeded or failed, the night at Hargrove Hill was almost over. And so was my humanity. My new body moved with horrifying efficiency. Each stride covered yards, joints bending in ways that should have been impossible. Despite the alien sensations, I felt a strange euphoria. Power flooding my limbs, senses sharpening beyond human limits. I could smell the damp earth, hear insects burrowing beneath the leaf litter, see individual dewdrops on spider webs 50 yards away. I reached the oak tree in seconds. The lantern still hung from its branch, flame guttering in the pre-dawn breeze. At the base of the trunk, half buried in moss and fallen leaves, sat the first boundary stone, a rough obelisk about 2 feet tall, carved with spiraling symbols that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. Behind me, the sounds of combat intensified. Howls and screeches echoed from the mansion as the two factions of skinwalkers tore into each other. I didn't have much time before the ones still loyal to the Covenant would come for me. I knelt beside the stone, bronze key clutched in elongated fingers. Up close, I could see that the symbols weren't carved into the stone. They were moving beneath its surface, like insects trapped in amber. At the base of the obelisk was a small keyhole, almost invisible among the lichens and moss. I inserted the key. The stone grew warm, then hot, vibrating with energy that made my transformed teeth ache in their new configurations. I turned the key 3 times counterclockwise, the opposite of the cellar door ritual. The stone cracked with a sound like breaking bones. Green light spilled from the fissures, and a subsonic rumble shook the ground beneath my feet. 1 down, 6 to go. My phone buzzed. The screen showed a map of the Hargrove estate, with 6 blinking dots marking the remaining stones. They formed a perfect heptagram around the property, with the oak tree at one point. "Hurry!" the message read. "Covenant breaking. Hargrove knows." As if in response, a shotgun blast roared from the direction of the mansion. I looked up to see Lawrence Hargrove sprinting across the lawn with inhuman speed, his elderly frame moving with the same predatory grace as the skinwalkers. Of course, generations of proximity to the entities had changed the Hargroves too. "Wells," he bellowed, voice distorted with rage. "Do you know what you're doing?" I was already running toward the next stone, my transformed body eating up the distance. According to the map, it lay at the edge of a small pond behind the mansion. Hargrove fired again, buckshot whistling past my elongated head. The pond was really more of a dark pool, its surface unnaturally still despite the morning breeze. Green algae formed patterns across its surface, the same spiral symbols that adorned the house and stones. At its edge, half submerged in black water, was the second boundary stone. I splashed into the shallows, the cold water burning my transformed skin like acid. Whatever I was becoming didn't like water. I fought through the pain, reaching the stone and jamming the key into its lock with shaking hands. 3 turns counterclockwise, another crack, another pulse of sickly green light. The water began to boil around my feet, not with heat, but with motion. Thousands of tiny, multi-legged things erupting from the mud, swarming up my transformed legs. I screamed, a sound no human throat could make, and lurched back to shore, batting the creatures away. They weren't insects or amphibians, but miniature versions of the skinwalkers, each no bigger than a fingernail. The spawn of whatever lived below. Hargrove was closer now, reloading his shotgun with practiced efficiency. "You fool," he shouted. "You're releasing them all, even the ones we've contained for centuries." I didn't stop to argue, just ran for the third stone. My body was changing faster now, bones cracking and reforming with each stride. My skin had become translucent, revealing a dark lattice of structures beneath that were neither muscle nor bone, but something alien. Only my mind remained my own, and I clung to thoughts of Sarah. Not the twisted creature she'd become, but the woman I'd loved. The third stone stood in a small family cemetery at the edge of the property. Old gravestones tilted at irregular angles, all bearing the Hargrove name. The boundary marker stood at the center, this one carved to resemble an angel, with its face worn smooth by time. As I approached, the ground began to shift. Fingers of dirt pushed upward, forming into hands that grabbed at my ankles. The dead, or something wearing their shapes, trying to stop me. I tore free, reaching the angel stone and finding its keyhole hidden where a heart would be. 3 more counterclockwise turns. The stone angel shattered, fragments dissolving into dust that swirled in unnatural patterns before sinking back into the open graves. A shotgun blast caught me in the shoulder, spinning me around. Pain blossomed, hot and sharp, but different from human pain. More data than sensation. I could feel the pellets working their way out of my transformed flesh, pushed by a body that no longer followed human rules of biology. Hargrove stood at the cemetery gate, his face contorted with rage and something else, fear. "The Covenant has kept them contained for generations," he shouted, reloading again. "Break it, and they'll devour everything, starting with us." "They want to be free," I called back, my voice a distorted approximation of my former speech. "You've been keeping them prisoners, using them. They're not human, Wells. They never were. What looks like suffering to you is just their natural state." He raised the shotgun again. "Your wife is gone. Whatever wears her shape now isn't her." The mention of Sarah sparked rage that accelerated my transformation. My vision split into multiple spectrums. Bones liquefied and reformed. Extra joints sprouted along my spine. I lunged at Hargrove with inhuman speed, knocking the shotgun aside and pinning him against a gravestone. "You knew?" I hissed, face inches from his. "You knew what happened to Sarah. You knew what I'd seen in Blue Ridge." Hargrove didn't struggle, just stared at me with those knowing eyes. "Of course I knew. Why do you think I hired you? The Covenant requires a tithe, but it's stronger when the offering has already been touched by them. You were marked the moment your wife encountered a skinwalker. I just expedited your transformation. Why? What do you get out of this? Protection, power, longevity." He smiled thinly. Elizabeth Hargrove made the first covenant in 1887. She still lives after a fashion as their emissary. Our family maintains the boundary, provides the tithe, and in return, you become like them. I finished, seeing the truth in his two bright eyes. Not fully transformed, but not human either. We walk between worlds, as they do. His smile widened. But the full transformation requires a complete surrender of self. I've never been willing to go that far. Dawn light crept over the horizon, painting the cemetery in pale gold. I checked my phone. 3 stones remained, and time was running out. With a snarl, I slammed Hargrove's head against the gravestone, knocking him unconscious, and ran for the 4th boundary marker. This one stood in a small grove of twisted trees at the western edge of the property. Unlike the others, it was made of metal, bronze or copper turned green with age. As I approached, the trees began to move, branches reaching down like fingers to bar my path. I tore through them, bark and sap flying as my transformed body displayed strength I'd never imagined possessing. The metallic stone hummed as I grew closer, vibrating at a frequency that made my reconfigured ears bleed black ichor. The keyhole was hidden in a series of concentric rings at the base. 3 counterclockwise turns. The metal stone shuddered and began to melt, pooling like mercury before sinking into the ground. A howl went up from the direction of the mansion, not the chaotic sounds of battle, but a unified cry of dozens of voices. Through my enhanced vision, I could see skinwalkers pouring out of the house, some still fighting each other, others racing in my direction. Among them was the Sarah creature, moving with desperate speed. My phone buzzed one last time. 2 more, then center. Hurry. The map showed the 5th stone at the edge of the property near the road, and the 6th deep in the woods to the south. The 7th, the center of the heptagram, was back at the mansion itself, hidden somewhere I hadn't discovered during my shift. I ran for the 5th stone, my body now more skinwalker than human. My clothes had split at the seams, hanging in tatters from a frame that had elongated and reconfigured itself into something no longer recognizable as Ethan Wells. Only my consciousness remained, clinging to memories of Sarah and the promise of freeing her. The 5th stone stood beside the gravel drive near the property entrance. A simple granite marker that might have been mistaken for a mile marker or property stake by passers-by. As I reached it, a vehicle came bouncing up the drive, a county sheriff's cruiser, headlights cutting through the dawn mist. Perfect timing. Witnesses to whatever was about to happen at Hargrove Hill. I ignored the approaching car and jammed the key into the stone's lock. 3 counterclockwise turns. The granite split with a report like a gunshot, fragments exploding outward. 1 last stone, then the center. The cruiser skidded to a stop. The driver's door flew open, and a deputy emerged, gun drawn. "Freeze," he shouted, then faltered as he took in my transformed appearance. "What the hell?" "Get out of here," I tried to say, though I'm not sure the sounds that emerged were recognizable as English anymore. "Not safe." Behind me, the first of the pursuing skinwalkers crested the rise, their twisted forms silhouetted against the rising sun. The deputy's eyes widened. He fired 3 quick shots, then dove back into his cruiser and reversed down the drive in a spray of gravel. Good. 1 less innocent to worry about. I checked the map one last time before my phone shorted out, my transformed body's electrical field finally overwhelming its circuits. The 6th stone was a 1/4 mile into the forest south of the mansion. I ran, no longer bothering with the human mimicry of bipedal movement. On all 4s, my new body moved with terrifying efficiency, covering ground in great bounds. The forest blurred around me, my enhanced senses processing information faster than my human mind could interpret it. The 6th stone stood in a small clearing, this one shaped like a crude human figure. As I approached, it began to weep. actual tears streaming from roughly carved eye sockets. The ground beneath it was stained dark from years of the same phenomenon. I approached cautiously, skin prickling with wrongness. Unlike the others, this stone had no visible keyhole. I circled it, searching, increasingly desperate, as I heard the pack approaching through the underbrush. Then I saw it. Not on the stone, but beneath it. The keyhole was carved into a root-like structure that extended from the base of the statue into the earth. I dropped to my belly and reached under, inserting the key with clumsy, transformed fingers. 3 counterclockwise turns. The statue didn't break, but simply deflated, collapsing in on itself like a balloon, leaving nothing but a fine white powder. The center stone remained, hidden somewhere in the mansion itself. I turned back toward Hargrove Hill, the eastern sky now bright with full dawn. Whatever was going to happen would happen soon, in the light of a new day. The Sarah creature waited at the edge of the clearing, watching me with those familiar eyes in an unfamiliar face. "Last one," it said, voice less distorted than before. Then free. We raced back toward the mansion, my transformed body moving alongside Sarah's with horrifying synchronicity. The woods blurred around us, our inhuman speed turning trees into smears of green and brown. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit faded. The other skinwalkers were scattering, confused by the breaking covenant. "Center stone," the Sarah creature said as we bounded across the lawn, hidden, protected. "Where?" I asked, the word emerging as a chittering hiss from my reconfigured throat. "Below. Always below. The cellar." Of course. Rule 7 of the True Covenant. The cellar door must be unlocked during the dark of the moon to allow passage. The key ritual I'd performed at 3:17 a.m. hadn't been securing anything. It had been unlocking it. The mansion loomed ahead, different in the dawn light. Cracks had appeared in its facade, running like black veins through the white paint. Green light pulsed from within, seeping through windows and door frames. The breaking of the boundary stones was affecting the house itself. We entered through the front door, finding the grand hall transformed. The wallpaper writhed as if alive, patterns shifting and realigning themselves. The grandfather clock had melted, bronze and wood flowing together like wax. Furniture had rearranged itself into unsettling configurations that mimicked human forms. Lawrence Hargrove stood at the top of the main staircase, shotgun raised. Blood streaked his face from where I'd slammed his head against the gravestone, but he moved with predatory grace that belied his apparent age. Behind him stood 3 more skinwalkers, these different from the others. Their forms more stable, more human-like, though still wrong in subtle ways. The loyal ones. The hunters. "Elizabeth warned me this might happen," Hargrove called down, his voice echoing strangely in the transformed space. "Every few generations, one of the marked ones understands enough to be dangerous." He gestured at me with the shotgun. "You think you're freeing them? You're not. You're just changing who's in control." I didn't bother responding, just bounded across the hall toward the cellar door. Hargrove fired, the shot going wide, as the house itself seemed to shift around us, floors tilting and straightening in nauseating waves. The Sarah creature intercepted one of the hunter skinwalkers as it leaped from the balcony, the two colliding in midair with a sound like tearing canvas. They fell to the floor in a tangle of elongated limbs and twisted torsos, clawing and biting with inhuman ferocity. I reached the cellar door, now warped and expanded in its frame, leaking the same sickly green light from its edges. The bronze key trembled in my transformed hand, vibrating in harmony with something beyond the door. 3 gunshots cracked in rapid succession. Pain bloomed across my back as Hargrove's bullets, found their mark. I stumbled forward, black ichor leaking from wounds that were already beginning to close. This new body was durable, if nothing else. The keyhole in the cellar door had changed, no longer shaped like a screaming mouth, but like an actual human eye. Pupil dilating and contracting as it watched me approach, I jammed the key in with desperate force. It slid home with a sound like a satisfied sigh. "Don't!" Hargrove screamed, vaulting over the balcony rail and landing with inhuman agility. "You have no idea what's down there." 3 counterclockwise turns. The key moved like it was alive, almost pulling my fingers along with it. The door exploded inward, not breaking but simply ceasing to exist. Green light blasted outward in a physical wave that knocked me backward across the hall. From beyond came a sound no human ear was meant to hear, a vast, hungry susurration, like millions of chitinous legs moving at once. I continued forward, raising the revolver as Elizabeth turned her midnight gaze upon me. Her smile widened literally, splitting her face in half to reveal nested rows of teeth descending into her throat. "Little Walker," she said, voice resonating in frequencies that made my transformed bones vibrate. "Do you think your human weapons can harm me? I transcended such limitations centuries ago." "Not aiming for you," I replied, and fired. The bullet struck the stone at her breast. Cracks appeared, green light spilling from the fissures. Elizabeth's expression shifted from amusement to horror in an instant. "No!" she screamed, multiple voices overlapping in her throat. "The anchor!" I fired again, the last bullet finding the same target. The stone shattered, fragments dispersing into glittering dust. Elizabeth convulsed, her form losing coherence, dimensions collapsing in on themselves. The green light erupted from her in all directions, a shockwave that knocked everyone, human, skinwalker, and other, to the floor. "What have you done?" she wailed, her voice now singular, human, afraid. The anchor stone was the only thing keeping me from becoming one of them completely. Her form was simplifying, the extra dimensions folding away, leaving only a twisted approximation of her human shape. Around us, the house began to collapse, not physically, but metaphysically. Reality reasserted itself, forcing out the alien geometries that had sustained Hargrove Hill for generations. The formless entities writhed, their substance thinning as they were drawn back toward the cellar. "The boundary is healing itself," the Sarah creature said, appearing at my side again. "Natural order returns." Hargrove lay on the floor nearby, his body rapidly aging as whatever preservative effect the Covenant had provided faded. Decades caught up with him in seconds, skin wrinkling, hair whitening, muscles atrophying. He reached toward Elizabeth with a gnarled hand. "Mother," he gasped, voice thin and reedy. "Help me." Elizabeth ignored him, her attention fixed on her own transforming body as it settled into a final shape, neither human nor fully other, but something in between, a skinwalker, like the rest of us. "Centuries," she whispered, examining elongated fingers with strange, detached fascination. "Centuries of maintaining the balance, and now I am merely one of the walkers." She looked up at me, her eyes now human again, filled with a mixture of rage and fear. "There will be consequences for this." The house shuddered violently. Plaster rained from the ceiling as load-bearing walls warped. The remaining skinwalkers were fleeing, streaming out doors and windows. "We need to leave," I told the Sarah creature. "Now." Together we ran from the collapsing mansion, our transformed bodies carrying us easily across the lawn. Behind us, Hargrove Hill imploded, folding in on itself like a house of cards. The cellar glowed briefly with intense green light, and then darkness rushed in as whatever doorway had existed there slammed shut. We stopped at the edge of the property. watching as the mansion was reduced to rubble. The oak tree still stood, the lantern hanging unlit from its branch. In the full light of morning, it looked like any other tree, ancient but ordinary. I turned to the Sarah creature, seeing familiar eyes in its alien face. Is it over? Covenant broken. Doors closed. It gestured to its twisted form, then to mine. But this, permanent. No going back. I looked down at my transformed body, elongated limbs, extra joints, skin turned translucent over alien anatomy. I was no longer Ethan Wells, not physically, but my mind remained, my memories, my love for Sarah. What happens now? I asked. The Sarah creature tilted its head, considering. Others like us, all along mountains, hidden, surviving. It reached out, taking my transformed hand in its own. Together? In the distance, sirens wailed. The deputy I'd encountered would have reported what he'd seen. Soon this place would be crawling with authorities, trying to explain the inexplicable. Together, I agreed, but not here. We turned away from the ruins of Hargrove Hill and moved into the forest, our transformed bodies blending with the shadows beneath the trees. Ahead lay the vastness of the Appalachian Range, thousands of square miles of wilderness where two creatures like us could disappear. Behind us, the last wall of the mansion collapsed, sending up a cloud of dust that momentarily blocked the morning sun. When it cleared, there was nothing left of Hargrove Hill but scattered stones and broken memories. And somewhere in the rubble, a bronze key waited for the next keeper of the covenant. 3 months later, the headline in the Dahlonega Nugget read, "Hargrove Estate Mystery. Deepens. No bodies found in mansion collapse." The article detailed how despite extensive searching, authorities had recovered no human remains from the ruins of the historic home. Lawrence Hargrove was officially missing, presumed dead. The night watchman, Ethan Wells, had similarly vanished without a trace. Local rumors abounded. Some claimed the Hargrove family had always been strange. Others whispered about sounds in the woods at night, movements too quick to follow, figures glimpsed between trees that walked on all fours but stood upright when spotted. Deputy Carl Mason had been placed on administrative leave after his report of humanoid creatures at the Hargrove property. He'd since checked himself into a facility in Atlanta for what his wife called stress-related hallucinations. The property remained cordoned off, deemed structurally unsafe. Nobody seemed eager to rebuild. In the mountains 40 miles north, where the Appalachian Trail cuts through dense forest, 2 hikers set up camp as dusk approached. They worked with practiced efficiency, pitching their tent and hanging their food bag from a high branch, protection against bears. "Did you hear that?" the woman asked, pausing as she arranged kindling for a fire. Her companion stopped hammering tent stakes. "Hear what?" "I thought I heard someone moving around out there." She gestured toward the darkening trees. Like footsteps, but weird, too quick. "Probably just a deer." The man returned to securing the tent. "This section of trail is pretty remote. We're probably the only humans for miles." She nodded, but her eyes kept drifting to the forest edge as shadows lengthened. "I read something online about this area. People going missing over the years. Hikers seeing strange things." "Every stretch of wilderness has those stories," he replied. "People get lost, confused. Imagination does the rest." As darkness fell, they lit their campfire, the flames pushing back the encroaching night. They didn't notice the 2 sets of eyes watching from the tree line, one pair blue-green, the other dark brown. Human eyes in faces that were anything but. "We've been watching the hikers for an hour," They're young, careless, unaware of what walks these mountains. Sarah suggests we move on, leave them be. They followed proper precautions, food secured away from their tent, fire well maintained. They respect the wilderness, even if they don't understand its true nature. I agree. We're not hungry tonight anyway, not for food or for shapes. We've learned to sustain ourselves on smaller creatures when necessary. The transformation has become easier to control with practice. We can appear almost human now, for short periods, enough to venture into small towns occasionally for supplies, though we avoid cameras and crowds. We aren't the only ones of our kind in these mountains. We've encountered others, some from Hargrove Hill, others from different covenants along the range. Most keep to themselves, but a few have joined us in what Sarah calls our pack. Safety in numbers. Sometimes I dream of my old life, my human body. Sometimes I wake reaching for a wedding ring I no longer wear on fingers that no longer resemble my own. But then Sarah is there, her transformed hand in mine, her eyes the same even in her changed face. We are something new now, neither human nor other. We walk between worlds by our nature, not by covenant or ritual. And when we hear rumors of strange rules and midnight rituals at old mansions or forgotten places, we watch. We wait. We remember. Some covenants are best left broken,